underserved, and failed us as children ourselves, and expects us to sacrifice our own babies to protect their system because those who have always done it this way are too comfortable. Mothers, fathers, tias, abuelas, grandpas, grandmas, nanas, and papas, fighting for our seat at the table. The National Parents Union was born out of a desire to connect together to ensure that no parent or family will ever have to stand alone again, that no group of parents will ever have to go up against the most powerful political special interest groups in the nation without other groups having their back, that together we could stand united as the critical missing piece that's keeping America from its true promise of delivering on the dream of a bright future for every single child. And that no one will ever speak for us, for our communities, our families, or our children, but instead, we would speak for ourselves. Our kids, our voice, the National Parents Union.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are the National Parents Union. I am Christina Laster. First and foremost, a proud mom of 4, 2 adult children, 2 school-age children, and an excited grandma of 3. And we're so glad that you are with us to get this vital information for our Read or Die literacy campaign. And I will pass it to Kulia and Yahaida to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. Thank you for coming.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kulia Pringle, and I am the Midwest Regional Organizer for the National Parents Union, and I also lead efforts for National Parents Union here in Minnesota. Glad to have everybody here today. Thank you.
All right, Yahaida. Yahaida's having an issue with her camera, but go ahead and introduce yourself, Yahaida.
Yeah, it's telling me the hose has stopped it. But hi, guys. How are you? Until we fix this. Oh, yes. My video is going to start. Yay. Hi, guys. How are you? My name is Yahaida Lopez. I'm a mommy of 2 amazing boys, one on the autism spectrum and the other one with ADHD. And I'm super excited that we're having this conversation. It's a much needed conversation. And, parents, per usual, we have the power, y'all.
All right. So, welcome to all of the people that are in this webinar and to our Facebook viewers. Uh-oh, I got to turn that off. Look at that. It's on 2 devices here, y'all. Technology. See what it does? During the time that I, was actively participating in the civil rights organizations, I met this wonderful, amazing person. His name is Kareem. And so we are going to introduce him now, and I'll let my brother tell who he is. And he has a presentation that you're going to want to watch more than one time. I remember the first time that I heard him speak, it was so compelling that I just had to continue getting to know more about what he was talking about and how it was impacting our communities and what it had to do with reading and literacy. And that's how compelling it is. And so I'm excited to introduce Kareem Weaver. And I want you to go ahead and tell people who you are, where you at, and let's learn something today.
All right. First of all, it's nice to see you again, Christina. I appreciate the National Parents Union for inviting me to this forum. I think it's very important. When I heard about the topic, read or die, that title is it kind of took my breath away. So I'm just happy to be here, and I appreciate the invite and look forward to sharing some things with you all. I am based in Oakland. Born in Oakland, raised in Richmond, California. And we have been focusing on literacy for the last 2 years before COVID. And with the organizations I work with, and I'll share a presentation in a second, we decided to make this the #1 priority. And when we made our decision that this is the number one priority, everything changed. Everything changed. All those distractions, all the people trying to go around it. If this is your number one issue, you don't put up with that. So we've been working on this for a year and a half in Oakland. We've got some changes made, but we got a long way to go. Working with civil rights organizations like the NAACP, working with parent groups like Open Reach and others, and having a grassroots coalition. Well, let me just jump into it. How about that? How about I just get started? Is that all right? Okay. Let me share my screen here and off we go.
Absolutely all right. And I want y'all to be making sure that you are taking the notes. He's going to leave his contact information in the end. You can definitely reach out to my brother Kareem. And so, yes.
All right. So, man, let's get it. So I co-founded an organization called Fulcrum, which stands for Full and Complete Reading as a Universal Mandate. The reason I did that was because I needed to make sure I had hands on this thing 24/7. That this was it. This was my focus. And so my partner and I, Eliza, we just decided, let's just do it. Let's just go. Because things had to change. And if we didn't do it, we didn't feel like, there were groups like the NAACP who had a campaign. There were others who were rolling out some stuff. We're like, we gotta just, and you gotta own it. That's the first message I give, is that you really gotta own. You can't wait for anybody else, because this is too serious a topic to just let it go to everybody else and depend on them. And I want to begin with this. This is a quote from Mother Maya, as I call her, Maya Angelou. And she had an interview with a magazine years ago, 25 years ago or something. And at the bottom, they asked her, well, what do young people, what should they do? And she said, well, you got to learn to read. And well, what if they can't read? And she said, and you see it underlined there, she said that this is illiteracy is as serious an issue to our history as the abolition of slavery. And that has stuck with me for years. That this is no laughing matter. We're in an information age. You can't read, where you gonna get the information? Okay, I tell people that's like being in a stone age, you ain't got no stone. Okay, so what we're talking about is that serious of an issue, and we got to take it that seriously. So I told you, basically what we were doing out here in Oakland, and our problems were the kids were flunking out of college and dropping out of high school. So we broke it down, and we figured out, we did a root cause analysis. We just kept asking why. We found out that they were flunking out because of algebra and because they couldn't read. Those are the two main things, English and algebra. And partially, then we realized, well, past the reason why they can't do algebra is because they can't read. Can't do a word problem if you can't read. So we just stuck on that. And we went through these 5 things. And this presentation is not going to be about necessarily about what we did in Oakland. This is more national. Okay, so we did those things. We really focused on the universities because, hey, folks have to learn how to teach reading. And a lot of our universities just aren't teaching. They learn the philosophy of reading. They learn all of this, but they don't learn actually how to do it. And then we had to get public awareness. That's why we do things like this, because people don't know. People don't know what's really going on, and they think something's just wrong with their kids. And so we had to get the word out. No, it's deeper than that. Teachers need help, principals need help, parents need help, and the kids need help. There's some things we have to do differently. All right, so let's jump into it. So you may already know this, the data around our kids, all kids, this is all kids in the country. NAEP is a national assessment, a test about different math or reading. This is reading. So in 2019, which is the last time they gave it, I understand if it's later than that, I don't know. But 2019, 34% of all kids, fourth grade kids were considered proficient. Now, proficient doesn't mean that you good to go. All right, proficient just means you have just enough to be considered, like you can engage society enough to get by. Bare minimum of proficiency. Okay, so when you look at this, you notice that in 92, it was 29%. In 19, that's 27 years? Then we've gone up 5 percentage points in 20 at this rate. What, 200-300 years? How many? I mean, you know, there's an algebra problem right there. That's not fast enough. All right, no sane person thinks that's enough progress. And when you look at it, proficiency is this. They score proficiency right here, 240. Right, that's how they score proficiency. And these are just every year what we scored. And so you're trying to get here. The kids are trying to get to 240. Remember that number, 240. If they're not at 240, then on this national test, they're not ready. They're not ready for college and career. They're not ready for 5th grade. Okay, this is a 4th grade test. So, well, let's look at it. We oftentimes talk about the achievement.
You know what? I want to pause real quick because in our state, here in California, and some of the other states do the same thing. They talk about it in terms of standard met, standard nearly met.
Right.
And so when I see the percentage of students that are not meeting it or nearly meeting it, it's the same. Right. I mean, those are the same things. Nearly meeting something doesn't mean you met it. Right. When you talk about proficiency. Right. And really just looking at the amount of students that are moving through grades that are not reading English language arts standards, and then correlating that. A lot of you parents may not even understand that if you can't read, you can't do math, that word problem's going to come.
That's right.
That word problem is gonna come.
It's a math problem, but it's really a reading problem.
Right.
Really what it is.
Thank you for highlighting the word proficient and what that really truly means, so that no one is deceived by words like nearly met. Right.
Right.
So yes.
So if you look at 240 as the bare minimum, but then you look at all the different groups. Okay, we hear about achievement gap. But you probably see on this, nobody's at 240. Nobody. Now, I understand that, you know, I'm Black, proud to be Black. We're at 204, right next to American Indians and Hispanics right there with us at 209. Okay, so you can oftentimes get spun in different directions because of the questions about the gap. There is a gap, but that's like sitting in the back of the bus and arguing about whose seat is best when the whole bus is driving off the cliff. Okay, nobody's at 240. And that's what we oftentimes don't realize. Now, okay, so the question is why? Okay, and we really want to focus on dyslexia today, specifically. So this is just California. I know that there's folks here from all over, but in California, the Department of Education came out with a document a few years ago, and they stated this. They said one of the greatest contributing factors to low achievement in reading is lack of early and accurate ID of students with dyslexia. So they're telling you straight up, listen, we don't know what to do with this, but we do know that this is one of the main reasons they can't read. Now, most of our educators don't know the first thing about dyslexia. Most of our parents, we don't know. Parents don't know. Grandparents don't know. This is a mystery to all of us. But here's a Department of Education saying, man, this is one of the main things that's tripping up our kids. So I want to get into this and really understand what it is and how it impacts kids and what needs to be done about it. So I always put this up, the idea that, yes, we, you know, I don't want to get too far down the road of, I'm going to go there, Black and brown kids. I'm going to go there. And FYI, this is 3rd grade kids in Beverly Hills Unified. So when we talk about poverty and not having poverty, so with all the money, with all the resources, with all the privilege, and they applied that to kids, because listen, if kids aren't reading by 1st, 2nd grade, parents with money are putting their money on their kids. So by 3rd grade, at the end of 3rd grade, 71%, that means 3 out of 10 of them can't read either. This is a national crisis. Everybody's caught up in this. Now, I do want to focus on Black and brown folks for a few reasons. There's some stark differences here.
I do. Our audience know. I'm sorry, Kareem. I do want to let our audience know. I see questions coming in the chat. We'll do our very best to address your questions at the end. So we're taking note of those questions. Kareem will be around to answer some of those questions. I see him coming, and I don't want you guys to think that we're ignoring you. So just hang in there. Thank you.
So I wanted to highlight this because this is a peculiarly pernicious situation with African American and Latino students, particularly pernicious. So there was a podcast recently. You can look it up. Just look up Geraldine Dyslexia Black students. It'll pop up. And when you listen to it, I want to just play like 15 seconds of it.
I'm sure if I had the resources, I could put him in a private school and he would get the help. But because I don't have the resources, I can't get the help. And so you'd be a candidate for the state prison or whatever prison there is.
Now, I've had the privilege of getting to know Miss Robinson, of working with her and her children, her grandchildren. But I play that little 10, 15 second clip is because the consequences of this are known. Everybody knows what it is. Everybody knows that if you have something they don't want to deal with, and your kids are struggling to read and nobody knows what to do and there's no progress going, you just see it coming step by step by step, year by year by year. And it's almost like a wave on you. So I've been fortunate to follow this family, to work with this family, and to support these kids, Ms. Robinson's grandchildren, along with my partner at Fulcrum. However, this is a nationwide crisis. I urge everyone to listen to that podcast. There's 2 parts to it. And she can tell you all the ups and downs and what it's like. But there's one little piece that I want to highlight. In that podcast, we're in the write-up for it. He said, I told the district, we have a history of dyslexia. And they said, no, that's not the problem. And that's when the fight began. Now, the reason I point this out is 2 reasons. The kids couldn't read. And the district said, well, you telling us about dyslexia? No, that's not the problem. What do you think they thought the problem was? This is very, very important. The first thing we have to understand is that when it comes to Black and brown children, when they struggle, the reasons go towards other things. Well, it couldn't be a processing disorder. It couldn't be this, you know what, maybe they just need more time. There's a little delay. Or you know what, maybe they're just not that bright. Maybe they're just not that bright. And also when she said, in my family, we have a history of dyslexia. She had a couple of kids that were dyslexic. Now here are grandkids. We have a history of dyslexia. And they, so what does that, and she's trying to tell them this, and they say, no, that's not it. What does that tell you they think about her? You don't know what you're talking about. We're the experts. You're the parent. Stay in your lane. And the first thing I tell anybody, any organization, any group, any parent group, any individual, you cannot let people box you into your lane of baking cookies, okay? Of driving for the field trip, of whatever is the acceptable lane for parents to be in. You got to be willing to say, you know what, you may not think I know what I'm talking about, but even still, we're going to take this test. I have a right to do this under federal law, and you're going to follow. You have to be willing to get out your lane, because the perceptions of the kids and the parents is not all good. And then there's this definition of dyslexia. And you'll hear about that when you listen to the podcast. I want to share with you some things that I'm sure you're familiar with this. They might tell you, well, it's not about the teaching and learning. It's not about dyslexia. It's really about poverty. Your kids are so poor, that's why they can't, or they're so traumatized, or all the stuff. They're just bad. Or racism. Okay, fine. There's racism. But the biggest racist thing is the fact that you're denying all these Black and brown kids an opportunity to learn how to read. And the students' actions or deficiencies, lack of progress, according to her podcast, are like, her kids were told this: didn't get help, can't sit still, angry. So you probably heard all this before. Okay, let's keep it moving.
Well,
So
I do want to just, can we go back to that? Can we go back to that? Because
sure.
I need for every single person watching this, parents and families, to know you are the most credible source of information when it comes to talking about your child. So you might not have a name for something, and you might not have the terminology, but you know what your family has experienced, what has been hereditary, how your child is. And I need for you to understand that nobody can talk you off of being the most credible source of information for your child. Okay.
That's right.
And so with that, you are empowered and authority over decision making for your child, and you need to advocate with that understanding. And it doesn't matter if 5 people say no, but it's because you're poor. No, but it's because you came from you have a single parent household, right? You need to say, this is what the experience is, and this is what the expectation needs to be. And so I wanted to really just hone in on that, right? Because it is used a lot. You're right. It is used a lot when we're talking about wanting to produce outcomes based on, holding people or systems to task and the accountability. Then it becomes that, well, it's not this, it's that. So know that you are the most credible source of information when it comes to your family, to your child, and to your household.
They have a million different ways to get you to let it go, to get you to defer and say, well, okay, I guess they know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. And if they, in their private moments, when they're away from the bright lights or the IEP meeting or whatever, they'll tell you, we have no idea. We're not sure. We don't know. I didn't learn this in school. If you have that type of relationship with them on the side, they say, don't quote me on this. But we're all on the same page, but we don't know. So you can't let them run you over like that. You have to just say, look, something's going on. You clearly didn't meet the goals of last season's IEP last year. So he needs testing, or she needs testing, educational testing, a full evaluation. And you have to be diligent about that, steadfast. So a part of this, now I said it could be racism. Well, you'll see what's wrong with this. Part of the old definition of dyslexia, which is, there's some merit to it, but it's more than that. But I want you to hear what 2 of the preeminent scholars in the field have to say about the definition. And you'll see what's problematic about this. This is only lasts about a minute.
You just simply define dyslexia.
Dyslexia is an unexpected difficulty in reading in an individual who has the intelligence to read at a much higher level.
In 1983.
Stop. That's all you need to hear. Y'all heard that, right? Unexpected difficulty in reading in an individual who has the intelligence to read at a much higher level. Now, since then, we also know there's a neurological aspect to it. As a matter of fact, there's a processing a piece to this in your brain. But that's the old definition. Now, the issue with that, which I'm sure y'all already know, there's officially no problem if you don't think the kids are smart to begin with. Officially now, officially. Because you have to think that, that the child, the difficulties in reading are unexpected. So if you expect a little, then hey, it really is no problem. And that's one of the things that we have to wrestle with when it comes to race and class and all the rest, that, performance does not equal intelligence. If you don't expect anything from the intelligence and the performance, in the problem. The reality is it's neurological, it runs in families, schools don't know how to deal with it, and it requires something. They have to do certain things. It's about how the kids are hearing sounds, auditory processing, how you hear sounds. So it's a real thing, not just somebody's biased notion of what this kid should and shouldn't be able to do. When somebody says, oh, let's just wait a little while, it'll be all right. Now, who you think is saying that? Somebody that believes your child is genius, or somebody that believes, look. So there's an expectation component to this too. And you can't let people slow walk you into standing down, because they'll do the wait to fail thing on you all day long. So this is going to be a little technical before I jump back into the other parts of it, but we laid out, there's 5 things. The science, the research says kids got to get 5 things early to get a foundation for reading. Okay, they need all 5 of these things. I'm not saying one is any more important than the other, but you got to have these 5 things when you start to learn to read. And the phonemic awareness and the phonics, that's big. Now, right now in most schools, first of all, a lot of educators don't even know the difference between these 2 things because we weren't taught in our graduate schools. They didn't teach us that. I know that may sound crazy to some parents, but it's true. And a lot of the stuff in here between these 2 pillars are not even taught. A little sliver of phonics is taught. For fluency, most schools don't teach fluency. And a few do, some do, a percentage. And I'm doing this according to the percentages based upon a national teacher survey of what they think is supposed to be in a balanced approach to reading, which is what most of them aspire to. And for vocabulary and comprehension, you get a little vocabulary, you get a little more comprehension, but that's a lot of red. Our kids supposed to get all of this directly, systematically, explicitly, like not even an issue. This should be the beginning of early reading. But instead, we get little slivers of green, and that's a big part of the challenge. It actually breaks down like this, okay? So there's some kids, 5%, who they're going to learn to read. It's almost, they don't even know how they learn. They don't. And another 35%, pretty much whatever you do as a teacher or a school, they're gonna pick it up. Whatever the strategy is, the curriculum, whatever. It's pretty easy. Then you got another 40 to 50%, okay? Which is the biggest chunk on here. And that 40 to 50%, you better give it to them step by step. And it better be systematic. It better be, straight up. You got to teach them. And then 10 to 15%, you need that and more. That's your dyslexia crew. Now, if this crew right here is all right, the dyslexia group, everybody's going to be all right. Okay. That's just common sense. And these guys, they require that and some assessment, some diagnostic work, but they can also learn to read. Now, what is that new? No, this AFT, which is actually a national teachers union, they've been saying this for years. This man right here, John had in his team, 300 million students worth of research. They did a research of the research. They said the same thing. The national reading, the federal government weighed in. They said the same thing. And out in this national reading, but this one here I'm gonna focus on, this OJJDP. I don't know if you all heard of this. When I saw the commercial and I saw the website for National Parents Union, I said, you know what, they need to hear this. In 2003, Department of Justice gave a report out. And this should be, I mean, this is, it said, there's a link between academic failure and delinquency, and it is welded to reading failure. This is the Department of Justice saying academics and delinquency go together, and it's welded, it's stuck to reading failure. So when we talk about the school to prison pipeline, listen, the Department of Justice has been knowing about this for 20 years. They've been 30 years almost. They've been banging the drum on this, trying to get the education world to pay attention. They know the kids can't read. They know when people come into the incarceration system, they can't read. And then they went on to say this: it's not just a relationship or a correlation. It's a cause. They cannot decode and they cannot read fluently. This is what the prison system is saying. So you can't tell me that this is news when 30 years ago, the Department of Justice was saying this. And then they said there's no evidence. A lot of these people come in the incarceration system and they're actually not dyslexic. Most of them, even if they have a diagnosed learning disabled label or whatever it is, we don't have any evidence that there's anything wrong with their brain, neurologically abnormalities, nothing. What we do know is that they're not, Lord have mercy. Number 4, these so-called learning disabled kids, did not get the type of instruction recommended by the research. Okay, so what kind of instruction do they need? I need a minute after that, but
you know, I actually do too, because we're
I'm
talking about information from the Department of Justice. I just need
right.
you guys to process that, right?
That's right. That's
We're
right.
talking
And
about-
in the education world, is saying, no, y'all, that's not it. Y'all don't know. We got our own ideas. They're saying, listen, we getting them in here. We getting them. And we're telling you. In fact, if you go back here, one of the things it says is, they say, obviously, the first step is to, reduce the number of recidivists. They're trying to reduce recidivism. And so later on, when our former president, Donald Trump, signed the First Step Act, that's where that came from, the first step. Because now, when you go to federal prison, according to this new First Step Act, you have to be screened for dyslexia. 30 years later, the Department of now, why aren't our school districts screening for dyslexia or even risk of dyslexia? Why not? Why isn't it mandatory across the country, statewide, each state? Why are we waiting for kids to fail? Anyway, so this is
that brings up an interesting topic of discussion, and we'll have to address that on another show. But I have had conversations with legislators who are dyslexic. Okay, right? For y'all that don't know, the legislators, bills become laws. And so this is as easy as, in my view, if I'm thirsty, I'm gonna get some water, right? If you're diabetic, you're gonna take back diabetic medication, right? If you're a legislator, you have the ability to create changes through bills that become laws, right? And especially the ones that have experienced this in their own personal lifetime, you would think that more of an effort to impact change will be done through legislative efforts, at the very least, to set that foundation that says we are going to address this with intentional, focused, and establish a foundation, right? And so it really does make you think. I see people all in the chat saying, is this intentional?
Well, let me say this, and I'll give you California as an example. There are powerful forces that don't want kids screened for dyslexia. First of all, if you screen them for even the risk of dyslexia, reading problems, now you got to do something about it, okay? So they don't want to screen, first of all. And second of all, in California, our governor's dyslexic. The head of Senate Appropriations is dyslexic. He put a bill forward, 237, passed the Senate unanimously to screen every kid K2 for dyslexia statewide. Got to the House, and it's 87% popular in the public. Got to the House, it's obviously going to pass. Forces weighed in, political forces and special interests weighed in. Now it's being held. The chair of the committee is holding the bill, meaning it's not even going to get a vote. That's the way to kill it. Just hold it. Don't even bring it up to vote. So this is, you're right. It would seem to be simple, but it's not simple when you have folks in there who, for whatever reason, they're opposed to screening, they're opposed to assessing risk, they're opposed to science of reading, whatever it is, it's impacting our kids. So that begs the question, and it's kind of a common sense thing. If you could design the steps for kids to become readers, how would you design it? The way most schools do it now, they're missing steps. They're missing the foundational steps. They don't do all those 5 things. And so they're actually asking kids to climb up, and they're missing steps. And then they post this type of sign outside on their website or whatever it is. Oh, we believe in diversity, and all this. But in Texas, they had a study done, and they found 48% of the inmates are dyslexic. 80% are functionally illiterate. 48% dyslexic. So if you want to stop the school to prison pipeline, and you're not serious about dyslexia, if you want to keep your child out of jail, the first thing you might want to do is make sure they know how to read, get them screened for dyslexia if they have problems, because it is the biggest pipeline there is, straight to the penitentiary. And I'm not, listen, everybody from Muhammad Ali to Will Smith to Kobe Bryant to you name it, like this, it's not a death sentence. But if you can't sing or rap or fight, what you gonna do? Not all our kids are 7 foot tall and can jump out the gym. Not all our kids are 6'5" and run a 4.40. Now, if you are, they'll work with you. But if not, you know, it's a tough road to hoe. And we're not just talking about a few kids. We're talking about massive amounts of students going through the system with steps missing. The chaos that ensues is predictable. Now, in Berkeley, the city of Berkeley just recently, or the school district in Berkeley, California, just had to deal with a federal lawsuit. And sometimes it takes that. I got this off the Decoding Dyslexia website out here. Sometimes it just takes that. Sometimes it just does. They were sued, class action, and they end up taking 4 years, and it's finally being settled in federal court saying you're not serving these children right. And most school districts are vulnerable to this type of stuff if they haven't been doing right by kids, if they haven't been doing what the science and research says, and if they're not providing a free and appropriate public education. Many of them are. And so what Berkeley is agreeing to do is they're going to start doing screening for risk. Regardless of what the state does, they're going to do. And they had to be sued to get there, but they're there. They also, when it says BUSD will transition from using the severe discrepancy, that means they're going to stop waiting to fail. That's the wait to fail model, severe discrepancy model. That's wait to fail. So they're going to stop that. Instead, they're going to adopt something that can try to catch kids early and support them when they need the help. And then they need regular outside. These districts cannot monitor themselves. You can't trust the thief to guard the house. I hate to put it like that. Listen, I know many people in school districts. I know them. Some of them are my friends. Love some of them. However, if they have stood by the sidelines for 10, 15 years, not said a mumbling word, allowed children to fail, and advocated for approaches to reading that did not align with the science, they probably also have a learning curve. I'm assuming that they're just not, indigent. I'm assuming they're not just hard-headed against kids. I'm assuming they just didn't know. So how are they then going to be the monitors? They have to learn themselves. So there are some things that were put in place, and I would recommend parents, try to work with your school system. And if they don't work with you, you have to exhaust all your options. Now, there will be.
I wanted to reiterate that, right? Exhausting your options, right? And we see that there had to be a lawsuit in order to effect change, okay? And so parents and families, just like we know the government is going to fiercely guard and protect their own power. They have built-in incentive to do it. That's on a whole nother show too. That's why you see checks and balances, right? Branches, right? We as parents and families have to fiercely guard and protect our power and our children. And if that means escalating it and not waiting, we're not waiting for the goodwill and desire or the inadequacy of other people to do that. We got to continue to pursue and stay in pursuit so that we are not having generations of illiteracy continue here.
I'm almost done here. In fact, I'll just wrap it up like this. You might hear educators say, this is just a pendulum. It swings back and forth. They're saying this time. They're gonna say this a few years later. That's just that. Look, that's a deflection. I worked in schools for a long time. I was a teacher and a principal, and I did all that stuff. I can never remember a time where they did all the things that the AFT and the research was saying that you need to do. Never, not once. When we got close to doing it, I say like halfway there. Oakland was the fastest gaining urban district in California 7 years in a row. We fought like roosters, but we had a good program. Okay, we took that away, and now we have 11 of the worst 75 schools in the state for third grade reading. So it's not a pendulum. This is something that people just have not been doing. And I'm going to end with this before I even get to Mother Mind. By the way, some of the resources and endnotes, the references that I've made, you can go to this website down here and you'll see those links. But I want to share something with you. We did a town hall, and here we go. We did a town hall not that long ago. And we interviewed this young man. This lasts a minute and a half. And this gentleman is a professor. Now, when he was younger, he couldn't read. It turned out he had dyslexia, you know, and was labeled as being all the things that you hear. Now, the little boy is now Dr. Anderson, and Dr. Anderson is a professor. He works in the schools. He teaches university. He does all kind. He has a children book series that he publishes. So the reason why I want to show you this is because if your child is low, now remember, he'll tell you. I'm going to play this in a second. You'll hear his situation, but it's so easy to write our kids off. Don't do that. Don't do that. I don't care what they say. I don't care. I don't care what I don't care. Our children are brilliant. You have to hold on to that, even when it looks dark. If they will get what they need, they can excel. I'm gonna let you just hear this and I will do some Q&A after that. But I want you to hear from Dr. Anderson.
So in K through 8, I received messages about me being unintelligent. I knew because I had been assessed that there was something wrong and that my brain did not necessarily work like everyone else's. But before 9th grade, I'd never had anybody sit me down and really explain, this is what dyslexia means. This is why you process things the way that you process them. These are the specific gaps that you have in order for me to be able to work on those things. So when I got to 9th grade, I had a teacher named Miss Obiagu, and she utilized the Linda Mubel program, which is pretty much like a decoding system, where we're taking it down to basic phonetic sounds, sight words, and those sorts of things. In addition to teaching me those basic skills, she really connected me to literature that I could identify with. When I got to high school, I was reading at a 2nd to 3rd grade reading level. I met Miss O. She helped me develop those basic skills. And within a year's time frame, I was reading at about grade level. So going from reading at a 2nd grade reading level to almost being like 9th to 10th grade. By the time that I went to my 2nd year of high school, I was taking honors and AP classes. And by my junior year, I'd even taken some community college classes and landed an internship. Now, I know that my story is sort of an extreme story of growth over a very short period of time. But one of the things that I'm aware of is that those basic decoding skills are beneficial for all students.
So I'm going to wrap by just saying this. I played that because we get all kind of messages as parents about what our kids are and are not capable of. The system in all its power leans on us. Knows our children, whether they be in the back of the class with the hood on, whether they seem like they're disinterested, however they present, our genius is being ignored. Our children, our brilliance, our genius is literally being discarded for a whole variety of reasons. We have Dr. Andersons all throughout our classrooms, all in our households. I don't care what the labels are they put on our kids, we have to hold on to that. You have to figure out how to get them the help that they need and that they're entitled to by law. And when they get that help, you can't be amazed at what they'll do. They'll do great things. They do great things, but you can't take no for an answer. Okay. And I would say step 1, if your child is struggling to read, okay, have you taught foundational skills? What about the phonemic awareness and the phonics? When did you teach it? How did you teach it? Let me see. I want to come in and see it. Don't get shined on. This man said he had to wait until 9th and 10th grade and just happened to have a teacher who understood and got him the basic skills. In a lot of schools, they'll say basic school skills are ghetto skills. We don't teach ghetto education here. That is not serving them well. We want to do a more progressive, type where they discover the learning and all this. That's all wonderful. But Marva Collins was very clear about, the greatest of greats. Our kids need the foundation. They have to be taught to crack the code. And so with that, I just want to encourage everybody. I have, those end notes at the back, and I'm sure the folks at NPU will provide contact information if anyone wants to reach out, but I'm open to question and answers.
So we're going to hold those questions to the end.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Kareem. There has been a lot of people that have reached out to me about that NAACP resolution to view dyslexia as a civil right. This is the person to ask right here, right? And so if you can drop your email address in the chat, that would be great. And you guys can reach out to find out more about the work that they're doing around dyslexia. And definitely we're going to be asking those questions at the end. Thank you so much, brother, for that presentation and just bringing the facts and the truth and doing the work, right? And so we'll hold those questions to the end. And now I have the great opportunity to introduce Chris Stewart on. Hey, Chris.
Hello there. Hello, my sister. How you doing?
You know, I'm over here and it was 110 today, and I'm trying to make it through. People say they don't like fair weather friends, but I'm gonna have to be that when it gets that hot, y'all. So you know,
I know the feeling.
yes. And you know, when we were really just thinking about read or die, right? I thought about, and you know, Kulia had reminded me of literacy. The revolution will be literate. And I heard you say that on several times. So I really wanted you to talk about just the meaning behind that and what you have upcoming. Of course, introduce yourself to our viewers. Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you to the National Parents Union for all you do to lift up and connect people who feel very alienated in different communities, like they're fighting this alone. And now they're not alone anymore. Now they have a connection of sisters and brothers across the country that will stand with them when they're doing something. For Kulia here in my area, in my state of Minnesota, where we feel very lonely, to know you and Colleen and all your team and everybody else across the country, it connects us all, and that's power. That's what power is, like collective action. Power is also literacy. When we say things like education is knowledge and education is power, that is something going back to the earliest days of emancipation, when African Americans first came out of the bondage of slavery. One of the first things that they did was a wholesale effort to get everybody reading. And that was grandparents and adults, parents, children, everybody. And whatever they did, wherever they went, they built houses and churches and then schools. But even when they didn't have schools, literacy was the #1 drive for Black people in this country. And this isn't about Black history. When I point this out, this is about oppression history. This is about what people do to free themselves. Because the people in northern Mexico who overthrew their government, the native and indigenous people there did the same thing. The Maori people of New Zealand, when they decided to throw off the yoke of the oppression in the New Zealand government, they took their kids out of the schools and started teaching them and getting them literate in kindergarten, and then first grade and second grade and third grade and fourth grade and so on. So oppression studies tell you that without the written word and without the ability to read, you will be easily controllable. My quote, when I say the revolution will be literate, there will never be any freedom based on illiteracy. The proficiency rates that we see across the country, when we look and we see there's not a single state that does better than a quarter of its Black kids in reading proficiency, a quarter, there's no future in that. There's no freedom in that. There's no revolution that is going to be based on illiteracy. As a matter of fact, the continuance of our oppression, the brother that just spoke, Kareem, when he was talking about the connection to the literacy problem within jails, for instance. He didn't mention welfare, but we know with some great levels of predictability, if you are not learning to read and you are not literate, that the future for you is not very bright. And I tend to agree with him too, that I don't think that it is by accident. If you ever wanted to keep a people from ever reaching their full potential, the one way that you would make it happen is to make sure that they never become fully able to decode a complex world of text, be able to read, to write, to understand, to formulate thoughts, to even access some of the best things that have been written in the world, including revolution studies, which is what I study. So it all starts with literacy. The revolution will be literate. I got the shirt on and everything today, just so people know.
We're definitely revolutionaries here. And so for those of
Absolutely.
you watching, you know, I really want to really focus in on what you said about from the beginning, right? This oppression, this tactic of oppression. And I tie that into the law of first mentions. Like, what was the principle? What was the foundation? What was established first, right? And if you can be at the beginning to establish or set a principle, that's the way everything else operates, right? And so if we think about just the way that America values and deeply understands manifest destiny, eminent domain, we as parents in this day have to change our mentality to operate with manifest destiny and take over our kids' education through the tactic of eminent domain. And that's one thing the government understands, okay? I'll tell you that, and they understand it very well. So when we talk about revolutionary, we talk about the shift of setting principles, of reestablishing what is right, and denying and rejecting and kicking out things that are wrong. And so that is a part of what we're saying when we're saying you're going to read or die. And this revolution will be literate, and our children will progress. And it takes each and every one of us that are here right now watching this, one person at a time, one family at a time, one community at a time, to make sure that this is a reality and that we don't retreat back to the old established order of things. And so I just thought about that as you were talking about what was established first and the freedom from oppression that literacy can bring.
Well, I think the thing that's most important to say here is this gives power to the individual parent in one very specific way. If you believe that you have the power to take all this stuff over and beat it by doing simple things at home and starting at home, and you get that like muscle memory of doing it, now you no longer have to be at the mercy of a school system to do everything for you. This thing where we drop our kids off in kindergarten and we pick them up at 12th grade and wonder what happened, because those are supposed to be the experts. They're supposed to know everything. They're supposed to be trained. They got all the degrees. They got all the certifications. They talk to you like you're this big when you come to see them. They minimize you in person or whatnot. The most powerful way to overthrow the yoke of that oppression is to do the most basic, simple things you could do. Talk to your baby on a regular basis. Start a dialogue with them that never ends. And as you're talking to them, make sure you look directly in their face and that they see you when you point to things and touch things and you call a name to those things. They start associating words with things. So if you can talk, you can be a revolutionary. If you can do dialogue, you can be a revolutionary. If you can help your child understand the connection between a word and a thing, you can be a revolutionary. If you can take the simplest of books and start reading and using your finger when you read with them to point to words and point to objects and help them sound things out, guess what? You're more powerful than the systems that are trying to keep you down, because your child is brilliant. Your child is born brilliant. God made them brilliant from day one. We just don't treat them that way. We just don't treat them that way.
And so for those of you that are watching, I do recognize that literacy can be a generational challenge, right? And that's why we all exist as community, to help each other. And I really want to really talk about that, right? I cannot be comfortable in my own skin, knowing that my children can read and write, but my neighbor's kids don't know how to, right? And what if that person maybe, doesn't have the ability, right? Those are things that we need to be checking on our neighbors, finding out how we can help, not waiting for someone to come in and establish a new order of what they're going to do and how that's going to be a trickle down, slow to move. Kareem showed the chart in the beginning. And so collectively, we share our parent power as well to say, you know what, we're going to help each other. We're going to share resources. We're going to help you be able to find solutions on this. And so talk about your upcoming book as a solution and a resource that people can know more about.
Now, I don't want to let too much out of the bag about what will probably be my free ebook on the revolution will be literate. But a revolution is never one person. So you can be a revolutionary on your own by yourself, which is good. So let's start there. Every parent's a revolutionary. They're reading to their child. They're making sure that their child is understanding the connection between words and things, and they're helping their child decode the world, even starting with the most simplest of things, which is a parental dialogue that goes on between your child. So you might be a revolutionary and you're doing the one thing for your child that your oppressors expect you not to do, which is to prepare them to understand oppression. Because the way that you understand it is you can read the world. And once you start reading the world, you're free. You're going to be made to be free. Just like Frederick Douglass said years and years ago, once you can read, it makes you unfit to be a slave, right? We need to make each of our kids unfit to be slaves. That's a revolutionary. A revolution is when revolutionaries come together and find common cause with each other. And everywhere that they go, they increase the size of their power by being together. Networks. It's the gumbo theory. You got chicken, I got sausage, you got rice, you got shrimp, you got water, you got a pot, you got fire. Now we got gumbo, we can all eat type of thing. Now that is ultimately very powerful. I would love to see communities of reading, communities of practice and purpose created by people who understand we all have a role to play. Someone is better off than you and someone's worse off than you. So your role in between those two groups of people is to do your part. They should help you when they can, and you should help them when you can. I would love it if every adult smiled at every baby that they saw, so babies saw a steady succession of smiling faces. That's revolutionary, and it could be a revolution if we all did it. I love it if your aunts, your uncles, your cousins who had it in mind when they were interacting with you were saying, part of my job as your aunt, uncle, cousin, whatever I am to you, is to help you see the connection between the words that I'm saying and the things in life, right? You're a teacher everywhere you go. That's a revolution. It's a cultural revolution. I don't know how old everybody is here, but like, listen, I'm not going to put people on the spot. I'm old enough to remember a time in the 70s when we did have a big cultural push around literacy, specifically Black literacy. And there were these things like reading is fundamental, and there were these book vans that would show up in your neighborhood and give you free books and stuff. Do you remember this?
I was actually born in the late 70s. I'll tell y'all so y'all can send me birthday gifts. I will be 44 next month in September. Shout out to all September babies. But I do remember commercials, the libraries, we had bookmarks, reading was a national cause. And it was something that even if it was just, in a small space, you would see things everywhere, right? I remember turning on my TV, and I think it might have been the Bushes. I'm not really sure, but I remember seeing like just this literacy focus on people reading books to children, right? And so I can say that, why did that stop?
This is a great point. It's the best question to answer. And why can't we go back to it? Right? Why can't we start a cultural revolution? We keep waiting for other people to do these type of things for us, but you have to create the culture of learning. And maybe people like to boil the ocean. They like to start with big plans. I'm gonna get the whole world reading. No, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not. Not by yourself, you're not. Let's slow down here. Let's get, because the way every revolution is won is by a lot of people doing a little rather than a few people doing a lot. Like a few people can't make the whole revolution. So you need a lot of people doing a little. So culture change, small communities of practice, like what you all are doing as a network and an organization, by bringing people into community with each other, gives you the power now to start a cultural revolution around. I'll give you a brother who's passed away now at a very young age. One of Steve Perry's close friends. I was talking with him maybe about 6 years or so ago, and we were talking about ed reform, everything involved. And he stopped me at some point and said, Chris, if we could just get our kids reading, like as a starting point, all this other stuff you're talking about is true. That's all important. But if we could just get them reading, you just don't know how much bang for our buck that would how much damage we could do if we got that part going. And in that moment, it just hit me that, damn, that was incredibly elegant and simple. I was talking all this stuff about teacher quality and different kinds of schools and school choice and blah, blah, blah. And this brother was just basically, his name was Yusuf Salam. And he just said, if we can't get our kids reading, all this other stuff is for naught. Let's keep it that simple. Let's keep it that simple for our networks and our communities. Build community around this issue of getting our children to read.
I definitely agree. Can you tell the people how they can find you and how they can watch your shows as well? I see some comments in the chat about it. And so
Sherry Lucas says, that was 6 years ago. Unfortunately, nothing has changed. Well, the thing that I hope is changing, Sherry, knowing you as I do, is that people like you are waking up to the science of reading, and people like the NPU are creating community around the issue itself. You can find me. I'm at Citizen Stewart on Twitter. That's the easiest way to always find me. I'm also the CEO of Brightbeam, the Brightbeam Network. You can find us at brightbeamnetwork.org. You'll be able to connect with me there. And you can always email me. I'm chris@citizenstewart.com.
Thank you so much, Chris. We appreciate you coming and giving your information to the people.
I appreciate you all. Keep doing what you're doing. I love what you're doing. And you guys are such a bright light. Keep doing it.
Yes. We're not going to stop.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Christina. My name is Kulia Pringle. Again, I'm the Midwest Regional Organizer for the National Parent Union. I'm also a Brightbeam activist. Today, me and Sarah, a Minneapolis parent, we will be discussing our efforts at Minneapolis Public Schools to try to get a literacy plan for the children at Minneapolis Public Schools. Over half of all the children at Minneapolis Public Schools do not know their letters and letter sounds. And me and Sarah and some other Minneapolis parents have been working tirelessly on holding Minneapolis Public Schools accountable, making sure that they have a plan. We were told for the last year and a half there was going to be a plan, and what they released was a framework. That framework because the board was going to vote on it, and they ended up not voting on it. And so now we are told that they're creating a literacy model, a literacy logic model, where they'll be defining the problem within the next 3 months. So that's the latest word as far as Minneapolis Public Schools, and trying to make sure that there's going to be some sort of plan for these kids coming back after not being in school for a year and a half. We know they were failing prior to COVID, and so they're even further behind. Sarah, are you there?
Yep, I am here with you.
All right, so I'm introducing Sarah again. Sarah is a Minneapolis Public Schools parent, and together, along with the Minneapolis MPS Advocacy Group, we have been working to try to hold Minneapolis accountable for their lack of a literacy plan. So Sarah's going to speak about our efforts and give us some brief overview of, what advocacy can look like and how hard this can be. So go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kulia, and thank you, National Parent Union, for having us. Kareem and Christopher did a great job of kind of framing the national bigger picture discussion around dyslexia and literacy. Kulia and I want to drill down into work we've been doing here in Minneapolis, along with our partner, David Weingartner, who isn't with us tonight, but I want to name check his amazing work on this too. I'm going to share my screen quick. And while I do that, as Kulia mentioned, we've been working on some organizing around Minneapolis Public Schools for almost a year. The end of August will mark 1 year since we formed MPS Academics Advocacy Group and started a push around literacy. I came to this push and this organizing because I'm the parent of 3 Minneapolis public school students, 2 of whom are struggling readers, and our son Jack was diagnosed with dyslexia in late 2019. And it was years of watching him struggle and feeling like I was pushing against a string, advocating for him in his school with his teachers and principal. It took a few years of just fighting that fight before David Weingartner, Kulia and I's partner in this work, pushed me to widen the lens and try to push more broadly against a district that's not serving kids like my son Jack well, and tens of thousands like him. After Jack was diagnosed with dyslexia, the one prescription we were given was to go hire a tutor trained in the science of reading. These were terms I had never heard before. So I want to give just a little bit of background on kind of what some of these terms that we throw out in this work are and what they actually mean to parents and caregivers. The type of tutoring that Jack was prescribed, as Kareem also established, the prescription for kids with dyslexia and for all kids to learn to read is explicit systematic instruction. That's a necessary model to form the connections between letters and sounds that kids with dyslexia, but also lots of struggling readers, struggle to connect. Sorry. So one of the many challenges that we had as we sat down and started organizing, connecting with other parents and other advocates like Kulia, we came up against some kind of key challenges that I wanted to outline here. One is that kids are not screened and diagnosed with dyslexia. Dyslexia is primarily a diagnosis that kids in white bodies like my son Jack get, while global majority kids are left to struggle. Very few districts screen all students. Minnesota is actually one of the states that has passed a statewide dyslexia screening requirement. It went into effect this school year. Curriculum and core instruction were another challenging area that was highlighted in our organizing work. Balanced literacy curriculums like the one used by Minneapolis Public Schools have faced tremendous scrutiny. They're in use in schools across the country, but they're so poor at teaching, especially those early literacy, those foundational literacy skills that kids need in order to learn all future skills. Those balanced literacy curriculum are so bad that states like Colorado have actually moved to prohibit their use in Colorado public schools. Many educators, as Kareem also touched upon, many educators have also highlighted that they were never taught how to teach kids how to read. Another challenge we identified in Minneapolis public schools was capacity constraints around providing effective interventions for students who needed them. So the small group, the one-on-one tutoring, the emergent bilingual services, those services are constrained by capacity to provide them to the number of students who need them. Common excuses from the folks in charge that we've heard during our organizing push the last year, all too often, and Kareem touched upon this really well as well, but all too often school leaders blame poverty and parents. This is BS, as Kareem really well established. It's also common for administrators to dismiss the experiences of individual students or families as not reflective of broader issues. This is also BS. And it sort of makes especially important the need to connect, collaborate, and organize with other parents in your school district. The privatization of literacy instruction is another challenge that has really come to the forefront in this organizing work. I've seen this up close because we've lived it with my son. My son struggled for years in a public school that was told, and we were told they did not have the capacity or expertise to test him for dyslexia. So we did what a lot of parents did, and we went the private route, both to get Jack assessed and diagnosed, and then to do the tutoring work that he was prescribed. So privilege and wealth are too often dictating both who is diagnosed with dyslexia, but then also whether those students receive the supports they need to be successful. Some ways to advocate for your student in school that we've been working on here in Minneapolis Public Schools for the last year. is to ask if your child's teachers have been trained in the science of reading. Letters training is one model that many districts across the US have adopted and statewide in the state of Mississippi. And they've shown tremendous growth in the reading proficiency of students whose teachers have received that training. So ask about the training your kid's teacher has received. Another important thing is to identify the type of literacy curricula being used in your school. And if it's a so-called balanced literacy curriculum, you know, run for the hills, but then push like hell for that curriculum to be assessed, if not replaced with a structured literacy curriculum. And if your child is on or has an IEP, you can request structured literacy tools or tools rooted in the science of reading as an accommodation in your child's IEP. We have also been pushing for universal screening. Minnesota has luckily adopted universal screening for characteristics of dyslexia. I included a website here where you can check what your state's laws are around screening requirements for dyslexia and characteristics of dyslexia. Demand decodable books in your child's K2 or K3 classrooms. Decodable is just a fancy word for being able to sound out. So words that are spelled phonetically as they would sound. Decodable books are often lacking in early elementary classrooms, and it's one of the quickest and most impactful ways you can help struggling readers in those classrooms is to ensure that they have access to decodable texts. Ask to see your school's literacy plan. Minneapolis Public Schools is, as Kulia mentioned, now has a plan to have a plan. We continue pushing for a real literacy plan. Minneapolis Public Schools hasn't had one in more than 5 years. And my guess is that if you check with your district, they don't have a literacy plan either. It's important as parents that we demand that our schools and school districts have plans acknowledging and identifying the problem of struggling readers and illiteracy, and then mapping out specific actions and investments that the district is going to make to address those issues. And then demand data on your district's letter name and letter sounds assessment. In Minneapolis Public Schools, first graders are screened for letter names and letter sounds. It's a really simple screening. Students are shown a letter and they're asked to produce the sound it makes. In Minneapolis Public Schools, less than 50% of first graders know their letter names and letter sounds. My son Jack was one of them. And then push for expanded tutoring access. If we continue to allow or enable a system where just white kids like my son with some privilege and cultural capital to access are able to get the tutoring, the explicit systematic instruction they need, we're going to further widen gaps that are already hardened and entrenched. MPS Academic Advocacy Group is the group that David Weingartner and Kulia and I have formed and sought to expand for the last year. I hope you'll connect with us on Facebook or our website. We would love to talk to parents in other districts about how we've advocated, what's worked, what hasn't, and how we might be able to collaborate with parents in other districts. As I mentioned, we've been pushing for a number of things, including a literacy plan. We've also been pushing the district to comply with the state's new universal dyslexia screening law, assess the efficacy of the literacy curriculum and interventions MPS is currently using, expand access to teacher training rooted in the science of reading, and then of course the literacy plan is a critical step. I hope you will connect with us. I just want to say for the record that having to follow Corrine Weaver and Christopher Stewart is really unfair and I'm never doing it again. But thank you for having us. And I just want to say to Kareem, whose work I've followed for years. Thank you for the guidance you've given so many other parents like myself, you know, organizing in our cities and schools.
Thank you, Sarah.
And so we're going to have Kareem and Yahida come back on, and you stay there, Sarah. We're going to answer some questions that came up during this time, and hopefully, you know, get those answers and also help you with the solution that we have coming up to help you advocate, right? Because we don't want to just leave you with a bad feeling of what next. We want to put tools in your toolkit to help you advocate. And so welcome back, Kareem. There's questions that are going in the chat, and I'll do it from the last question back to the first questions. How do you advocate as a parent if your child's teacher has not been trained in science of reading? And you guys could just answer that as you wish.
I would say that, you know, there's a term called free and appropriate public education. If the teacher has not been trained, and it would be great if a teacher would acknowledge that, your next step is to go to the principal and say, what accommodations, what support will you provide my child to augment or to supplement what they're getting from the teacher who was not trained? You can ask for the professional development plan. But once they acknowledge that, then there's a deficiency, and that's okay. If you go to the principal and the principal says, and here is our plan to make up for that deficiency. What's not okay is to say, yeah, I wasn't trained in that, and that's it. I wasn't trained in that means, okay, well then how are we gonna make this work? How are you gonna make my child whole, educationally speaking? I think that's the next step. So if you can have that level of relationship and the person comes forward and gives you that information, then you go to the principal. If that doesn't work, then you go to the superintendent. If that doesn't work, then you go to the school board. There is a stated deficiency. Legally, they're required to provide your child certain things. And if they can't do that as an individual teacher, well, then there has to be some supplementary services provided.
All right, and then I have a question, couple questions from our Facebook viewers. They want to know, why are children suffering at the hands of district? Why aren't they helping them instead of failing them around this whole literacy problem? So anyone that wants to chime in there, go ahead, please.
I mean, I'll jump in and kind of say that systems are known to bully, right? Systems have been known to be abusive. And oftentimes many families, especially families of color, are abused constantly. And so there's this constant wall of asking for help, needing help, but the pushback becomes too much. And oftentimes we lack kind of like what Chris was saying, is working as a collective and building communities together and bringing parents together to fight back, more than just one or two parents that are constantly showing up at school committee meetings, right? Like you want to show up with a whole gang. You want to show up with enough people to say, listen, I got that same story. My mommy friend over here got the same story. My daddy friend over here has the same story. It's honestly standing back and resisting, you know, system bullying and abusive system. That's all it really is fighting right back.
All right, we have another question. Explicit systemic instruction. Will you explain more of what that looks like in an effective classroom? Was that part of your slides, Sarah? I think. Can you explain a little bit? Thank you.
I've gotten to see it up close the last school year as a result of distance learning. So my son's tutoring all of a sudden became very visible to me, and I got to see precisely what that explicit systematic instruction looks like. And what I was struck by the most is the order and logic in which letter names and letter sounds are introduced and then how they're reinforced. So there was a clear order of consonants and vowels that Jack was introduced to. His tutor basically started from scratch to try to help him form those connections between what a letter looks like and the sound it makes. And so I was really struck looking at his online school through Minneapolis Public Schools and what that instruction looked like, which seemed scattered. They would cover sight words with a long A sound, but they hadn't covered long A as a standalone letter or concept or sound yet. So when we talk about explicit, it means making those direct connections between what a letter looks like and the sound it makes. When we talk about systematic or ordered, it means that the order in which letter names and sounds and images are introduced makes sense, and they correspond to the sight words and the decodable text that the student is reading. And that's what I've seen up close with Jack's tutoring. And similar to the video that Kareem showed of Dr. Anderson, Jack has only had 1 year all online of tutoring twice a week, and he's made up 2 grade levels. But we've paid for that. And I know kids in this district who don't have the privilege and cultural capital to go learn what they are fully capable of learning. And so I think that's why the advocacy push is so key. But that instruction piece should make sense. It should be ordered and explicit.
I just want to add to that really quickly. Thank you for that, Sarah. So you have to make sure that they're not skipping steps. I know that makes common sense, but the best way to do that is to ask for the scope and sequence of instruction. That's their lingo. Hey, can I see your scope and sequence? I like to record it so I can monitor at certain time. Scope is, it means when are you going to teach what? And you should see all the stuff in there, right? And now that may seem like common sense, but here's the other part to that about explicit instruction. There is a culture of implicit instruction, of passive instruction. Just like there are some teachers who will say, sit down. Others who say, would you like to sit down? Of suggestive instruction. Some kids, you got to actually tell them, please sit down, or just sit down. And some kids, you have to actually teach them how to crack the code instead of inferring or helping them to get clues like a detective or whatever it is. There is a culture in education of using the passive voice. And that goes into, and there are some who think that's more intelligent. If I have to tell you what to do, you must not be that smart. It's why sarcasm rules the day in many classrooms and schools. It's a cultural thing as well as an instructional piece. But if you can kind of figure it out on your own, if you can scoop up words, you can get these clues, you must be brilliant. As opposed to saying, no, listen, everybody deserves a chance to crack the code, and then let them unleash their brilliance using that skill. It's a cultural thing. It's a way to teach, a pedagogical thing. But also, you just got to go in there and say, can I see the scope and sequence? And they should get that to you. Somebody in that school building should have that and can Xerox a copy right now for you. And if they can't, that's a problem.
You know, I always say I'm not an educator, but I am a political strategist and a legislative advocate. And so I hear you. And here is a question that is really touching to me when you think about it. Someone is asking, how can you recognize or identify a dyslexic child in a group of children that don't know how to read and write? And so that, you know, it's like really thinking about that, right? What is the norm right now? You know? And so if you have any advice or answer for that question, that would be great.
I want to just share what the neuropsychologist who evaluated our son told me to look for in my younger daughter, because she mentioned that dyslexia is often hereditary and what I should look for. And what she told me to do is show my daughter letter names and ask her if she can make those letter sounds. And by the end of kindergarten, that she should know 26 letter names and their corresponding sounds. And that for me was helpful because I could kind of screen Ingrid myself along the way as she struggled, but it also gave me some information I could act upon if and when she wasn't making progress. So I think that letter name and letter sound sort of screening is one parents can easily do at home. Simply show your child a picture of one letter and ask your child to make the sound that corresponds with that letter.
All right. Well, you know, Sarah and Kareem, we really appreciate you bringing your expertise and your information towards our panel discussion. We just want to give you a thanks from National Parents Union. And if you have a final word before we go into our offering to the parents and families out there, please go ahead and give your final word.
Sarah, would you like to go first?
I would like to go first, and I would like to thank Kareem Weaver and Fulcrum and the Oakland NAACP for the work they have done and continue to lead, because it's seeding work in other areas. And I'd like to thank Kulia for just being a collaborator and co-conspirator in this work here in Minneapolis.
Thank you for that. And what I'll say is, to wrap up, in that last question about how do you tell the difference, it's very hard to. It's really a sound thing, an auditory processing. The good news is, if you treat them all like they have dyslexia, everybody's gonna learn to read. That's the bottom line. Some kids have dyslexia, some have dysteachia. I mean, they just weren't taught the stuff. Okay, so just make sure that the kids are getting what they need. If you make sure the kids who are dyslexic are getting their sounds and everything they need, everybody else will be all right. But I also want to thank NPU and just acknowledge that this topic, as weighty as it is, I'm learning more and more it's wrapped up in all the politics and the this and the that. You have to stay the course. I want to encourage you all to stay the course. Don't let people knock you off your pivot foot. Don't let them make this about something else other than what it is. If your kids don't read, they're on a fast track to oblivion. I have nieces and nephews who are dyslexic. I have family members who, you know, my family, we've been through it. Some have been incarcerated, didn't learn to read till they got to jail. Don't let these folks mess with your family. Don't let these folks mess with your family, your kids, your community. You have to be as vigilant as soldiers. And I mean that with all due respect. I understand we get tired sometimes. I get it. Emotions rise and fall. I get it. But on this one right here, you got to stay on guard. Because if you lower your guard, the system will protect itself. Good people won't act like it. People who are your friends, who are nice, they mean well, they'll run you over. Sure enough, you got to be on guard. So I just want to encourage you all to stay vigilant. Sarah, I look forward to hearing more about your work in Minnesota and maybe working with you someday on collaborating, work with others across ethnic lines. This is just such a valuable opportunity to engage. I'm thankful for you for it. And I just want to encourage you guys, stay strong, stay strong. Your kids are dependent on you. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
You know, brother, I'm gonna be right here in the fight with you, all of you. And so we learned a new word, dysteachia. Okay. Thank you for that word, Kareem. I think I'm gonna add that into some of our future discussions. So, you know, I'm going to now present something that I want you all to be excited about. I know we at NPU are excited about, and as I bring it up, I want my girl Yahida over here to tell the people what we got right here, Yahida.
Listen, it's a power tool, right? Because everything about learning, understand how to show up in spaces as a special education parent is knowing the know, right? You need to know an abundance of information. And this toolkit is going to give you everything you need to know. and how to show up in the space and letting them know I'm not taking no shorts out of this conversation and in the education of my children. So without further ado, we're just going to talk a little bit about why this toolkit was really created. It's created because I don't know about you guys, but my journey in starting special education, I felt like so much information was thrown at me. I felt like I was walking into IEP meetings and I'm literally sitting at a mob sit down. Like I'm sitting here by myself and all those with the fancy acronyms behind their last name are sitting across from me. And I felt so isolated. Oftentimes, I was by myself and I didn't have all the information and the tools that I needed to better advocate for my child and my children, because I have two. And it took a lot of research. It took a lot of online decoding of information in order for me to better show up. So what we did for you was really create a toolkit that brings it down to a basic content for parents to understand information and how to basically pull up.
And Kulia, you could go ahead and chime in there. You know what? We even got all of the legal definitions in the parentified definitions right here for you. We're going to be posting this on our MPU site. We're going to add a video to show you how to use it. And I want all of you that are out there that have questions to reach out. You all have a regional support person from MPU, okay? So Kulia, if you could talk about how people can locate their regional support person to walk them through how to use this toolkit, because we're not just looking for allies, we're talking about advocacy, and we need advocates to pull up and show up. And we have this toolkit that is going to help you better advocate. That's why we're calling it the K-12 Special Education Advocacy Toolkit. Go ahead, Kulia.
I do want to, before that, I do want to touch on what Yahida just said, how she would show up by herself and then there'd be, the group of folks sitting on the other side of the table, the whole crew with the names and the credentials. I always tell folks, make sure you bring somebody with you, 2 or 3 people. Christina talked about this before, like if there's nobody that you can get that you have the time to inform, just bring somebody and just have them nod their head, and have a piece of paper and take notes. Like you cannot be alone, because that's how they take advantage of us. They know we don't know the lingo, they know we don't know the education jargon, and they see us sitting there by ourselves. They keep us in the silos and we feel like we're climbing this mountain trying to advocate for our kids. But the first step in order to get a contact with your regional organizer is to join the National Parents Union as a member. It is that simple. Once you join the organization, your regional organizer will reach out to you. I am the Midwest Regional Organizer for the National Parents Union. I believe I manage 7 states. So I'm working with folks in Minnesota, Michigan, St. Louis, Ohio. We are looking for folks in Wisconsin, North Dakota, South Dakota, Indiana, Illinois, Nebraska. I'm also working with folks in Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico is a part of the Midwest, even though it's not in the Midwest. They are a part of our region. We have the Northeast regional organizer, Maritza Gertie. She is wonderful. She has the East Coast, and then Massachusetts is its own entity when it comes to the East Coast. Texas, we've got Shay in the building. The West Coast, we're still looking for a regional organizer there, but we have Christina, who is our policy person there, and Christina is bomb in California. So all you have to do is join the National Parents Union as a member, www.nationalparentsunion.org. Click to join to be a member, and one of our regional organizers will reach out to you and we'll connect so that we can change the system.
I heard you say I'm bomb, right? If y'all invite me,
you are the bomb.
I'm dropping bombs.
You drop bombs.
So, California wildfire, we start. No, okay. So
who's over Kentucky? Where's Kentucky at? Is that the South?
We have Tap Shear, who is our director of organizing, right there in the chat. She will definitely lead you to the right person. I saw Hawaii shout out Facebook. Hawaii, we got you. And so we're just so excited to be able to offer you this toolkit put it in your hand. And we're not just going to stop at definitions, right? We want you to know how to escalate that process. We take stuff all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to. We're not leaving any children at a deficit. You know, I understand that right now the government's working on the COVID curve. We're working on the learning curve. We don't want to hear these nuanced phrases in the future about achievement gaps, right? Perpetual achievement gaps. And so that is what we do here. And I just wanted to encourage you all. We'll be putting this up on our website, like I said, and also creating a video to walk you through it. But definitely reach out to your state person at NPU so they can help you understand hands-on. And so you don't have to worry about, am I going to go to the meeting by myself? Am I going to have somebody that can help me? Do I have someone that understands what I'm going through? Because I got to tell y'all, I don't just do this because it sounds good. I'm in the fight with you. I have 2 school-age children, 2 adult children, 3 grandchildren, and I'm not going nowhere, right? And so we're all in this battle together. And I want us to have that collective parent power to be able to see our children learn and thrive. Yahida, tell them about Autism Sprinter.
So guys, I do many things, right? Because I wear multiple hats. I'm the founder of Autism Sprinter. I founded Autism Sprinter in 2014 due to my personal journey of navigating special education. And mind you, as a former person who's worked in a public school system. So it was weird wearing the hat of working in the public school system, and then also on the other end, fighting for my son and the services and the academic needs that he needed to become, I don't know. I don't even know how to define it because we have all these jargons, right? That sometimes it just doesn't fit the bill. So I just wanted my child to have access to a free appropriate education. And I wanted him to learn just like everyone else. And I wanted him to meet his goals like everyone else. And I found myself combating a lot of issues and decided to kind of share my personal journey online and invite other parents, especially families of color, to discuss disability and how to really advocate for your children and what you're looking for when you're sitting at IEP meetings, what questions to ask for, and breaking it down in terms that doesn't have to be fancy, right? Because there's a lot of parents who get lost in translation, and being able to just kind of teach parents the basic understanding of advocating. So we do a lot of that through Autism Sprinter. And we're always in the community, just kind of disrupting conversations. We're constantly showing up at school committee meetings, showing up at town council, kind of irritating politicians about their oath that they've taken to represent the community and what they're supposed to do to making sure that all children, not just their children, not just a district set of children, but an entire community, how all of our children can benefit from policy development that is inclusive for all, and dismantling a lot of the old jargons and a lot of the the status quo that kind of keeps us in a box, and we're just kind of going spinning in a circle. So a lot of the work we do is just a lot of public education and giving the parents the tools to really show up and how to really advocate for their children. You can find us. You can find us because I'll forget. Me, I'll be like, I'm Autism Sprinter, whatever. I just low key, whatever. But you can find us at www.autismsprinter.org. We do have a Facebook group on Facebook group, and it's under Autism Sprinter. If you want to follow me in my personal space, I'm tend to start a lot of trouble. You can follow me at I am the Mombakit on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So, follow me and, let's start some good trouble and let people understand that parents do have the power, and we don't need a lot of the fancy jargons, to show up in spaces just to ask, about accountability and having people handle their business when it comes to our children.
And we're disrupting that hamster in the wheel model, right? We're not about to keep going around and spinning in circles, and that's organized chaos. to keep people controlled under uniform, basic, and inadequate types of education. And we are saying enough, no more, right? If the pandemic showed you anything, it showed you the power of everyday people coming together and forming a solid voice collectively around what they would tolerate and what they won't tolerate, right? And so we can see that it is totally possible, totally doable, one person at a time, one family at a time, one community at a time. Kulia, tell them about the Read or Die literacy campaign popping off. Definitely want to know more about that.
Yes, read or die, as it says, and as Kareem says, as Chris said, like it's literal. Like either either you know how to read, or you're going to be, in the school to prison pipeline, or end up dead because of the lack of resources that you'll have. We just launched the Read or Die campaign. There'll be more conversations with NPU on the subject as far as dyslexia, literacy, special education. Here in Minneapolis, we plan on showing up and showing out at Minneapolis Public Schools to demand a literacy plan, as I said. So reach out to me, Christina, and join the movement.
And I want to kind of throw one thing out there, because I think, a lot of people don't understand that the school to prison pipeline is real. And if you look at the research and you look at the poster children of the school to prison pipeline, it is a lot of students in special education, students who are unable to read, students that are struggling socially and emotionally. And this is why Read or Die is really important, because this is how our children end up as statistics and having people capitalize off of their pain and suffering, because nobody's working towards preventing the school to prison pipeline, because everything kind of, there's money that goes into how to system bullying and abusive systems who continue to get funded and make a lot of money, when our children can't, produce academically, or however people want to call it. But it's important for people to understand that a lot of research, again, shows that a lot of children who are navigating the school to prison pipeline are children who were receiving special education services.
And earlier, somebody put in the chat, why aren't people rioting in the streets, to challenge the system? And it irritates me that a Black man or somebody has to die before we show up in the streets. We need to show up in the streets for our babies before they die. We need to show up in the streets for our babies before they end up in a prison. We need to show up for our babies before they end up in the cycle of poverty that continues to oppress our people, and we're not going anywhere as a collective. That's where Read or Die is. We literally need to be in the streets for our babies, and not after they're shot and killed by the system or the police.
Exactly. And so with that, I'm going to leave you all with a final thought. When I was a community organizer just statewide throughout California, and I'm going to bring this right back to the people that I represent, particularly because I'm in this skin, okay? I noticed that 68% of Black children from grades tested 3 to 11 in the state of California couldn't read and write at grade level. Then 80% couldn't do math, okay? Didn't matter what neighborhood, listen, it wasn't happening, okay? And then when I started really working on the national level of legislative advocacy, I looked at the data a little bit more closely, and it said that Black students hadn't progressed since the year 2000. Okay, this is 2021. Y'all can imagine how many generations. And when you look at the data and you really break it down, Black students are performing right along the lines of special needs students. Okay, and if it's happening that way data-wise, this is the data, this is not feelings, this is not conspiracy, this is not Christina ate a bad turkey sandwich for lunch. Okay, this is what the data indicates. And when you look at that as far as a nationwide impact and what is happening from sea to shining sea, let's call it that, right? Why is that happening? Then you see that there is something systemic that is taking place, just in case you didn't understand why we keep calling it this. And the only way that that can be disrupted, and I don't use disruption the way that people kind of think that it has this negative connotation of disruption and why do we disrupt? You could pay thousands of dollars to business advocates and business persons and business spokespersons and whatever. And I know because I have a master's in business administration, to learn theories around disruptive concepts for business. You can't even stay in the marketplace if your business is not disrupted. Okay, so when we're talking about coming in this way, we're using it in the best way possible. Things will not change. They will continue down the same path that they always been. And I don't want to see my 10-year-old son, 30 years old, and I'm looking at the NAEP data or the statewide data. And guess what? 80% of Black kids that look like him can't do math, and 68% of the kids can't read and write. No, enough of that. So I want y'all to join us in this parent revolution. As we have been talking through the chat, the information has been given. And I want you to really consider what we're saying and look at the data for yourselves. If you need help understanding how to disaggregate the data, I'm always willing to help and support you learn how to disaggregate the data. And then you will be able to see the picture very clearly about what has taken place, about what we're talking about. The school to prison pipeline is not a conspiracy, and I don't even want to call it some kind of notion that was made up on the left or the right, because I've heard that before, like, oh my God, we thought that that was a, no, this is what's happening to our children, and that humanizes it. Okay, so when you leave here, expect us to continue to disrupt and join us. Expect us to continue to have these conversations, and I want you to look in the data. Be checking out our page to wait for that toolkit to drop. Put that in the hands of your neighbors. Okay, let me tell you something. Your child does not have to be a student that qualifies for special education in order to demand a personalized learning program. That toolkit will help you with some guidance around what that looks like. Definitely be checking out other resources that we offer. We just thank you for your time. And if Kulia and Yahida want to give a final word of encouragement, that's my word of encouragement. Keep showing up, keep pulling up, keep disrupting, and keep your advocacy alive. Our children are really depending on us to speak up for them. Thank you.
I just have two words: pull up and stand up. That's it. Pull up, stand up.
I don't have much to say besides exactly what, my co-conspirators are doing, right? Pull up, we got to pull up. That's all it really takes. And understanding that parents are the most powerful people in any space. When it comes to your child's education, when it comes to medical providers, you have to own that role and never let other people dictate and tell you what your family should look like, how your family learns, and how your family gains access to resources. So again, pull up, and again, parent power. You're the most powerful person in any space.
Thank you, everyone. We will see you again soon. Remember that you are the most credible source of information and authority on your child, your household, and don't let anyone rob you from that. Bye-bye. Parent power.